But big changes are coming to SNAP benefits, and they could impact thousands of families across the state.
So the future for a lot of those people is very uncertain.
It helps a great deal, but it's not enough still.
They're very concerned. I mean, I don't want to go hungry.
9 million. That's the budget deficit facing Nevada's SNAP program after the new law called One Big Beautiful Bill was signed in July 2025. On paper, lawmakers called this a reform step, forcing the state to bear additional administrative costs. But in reality, the ones who pay the highest price are the ordinary residents, especially families living in Las Vegas. SNAP has long been considered a lifeline for tens of thousands of low-income households. As the budget shrinks, that life raft seems to deflate, submerging the poor in a tsunami of living expenses. The meager subsidies are now shrinking further, while food prices continue to rise. As a result, many families were forced to cut back on meals, veterans had to turn to food banks, and the elderly who were unable to work were easily pushed onto the streets. It's truly bitter that in a city renowned for its lavish parties, an increasing number of residents can no longer afford even the most basic dinner. In today's video, we'll explore how the SNAP crisis is turning dinner into a luxury and pushing thousands of families onto the streets. Can you escape this vicious cycle? Follow now. Can you believe it? In southern Nevada, 1 in 7 people live in food insecurity, meaning they don't know where their next meal will come from. And that reality is now even more serious, as thousands of families are facing the risk of not having enough for 3 meals a day after the recent changes to SNAP, the Nutrition Assistance Program considered the last lifeline for the poor. In July 2025, a new spending and tax bill, dubbed the Big Beautiful Bill, was officially passed in Nevada. Behind that seemingly promising name are significant adjustments to SNAP. Many residents had hoped this law would expand access to support. But on the contrary, doors that were already narrow are now becoming even more restrictive. The mandatory retirement age to maintain benefits increased from 54 to 64. Parents are only exempt if their child is under 14 years old, instead of under 18 as before. Specifically, groups that were previously exempt, veterans, the homeless, or adults who aged out of the foster care system, are now completely excluded. Not only that, but many recipients of benefits also have to prove they are working or participating in a job program for at least 20 hours per week using pay stubs or official documents. In other words, those who were already struggling, from the elderly and single parents to veterans and the homeless, now have to work or prove their ability to work in order to keep their meager benefits. But ask yourself, with elderly people who have multiple underlying health conditions, how many of them still have the strength to work? Meanwhile, housing rents in Las Vegas have increased by over 16% in just 1 year, and the cost of dining out has also gone up by 8%. This makes the working poor situation in Vegas increasingly prevalent, meaning people who still work and get paid, but whose income plus benefits isn't enough to cover even the most basic expenses. Karen Perez, a full-time caregiver for her mother, says that even with SNAP, it's still very difficult for her to manage the bills. She worries that these changes could cause her to lose her benefits, that the subsidy helps a lot, but with the high cost of living in this city, it's still not enough. Even with subsidies, the lives of many families were incredibly difficult. So, when that source of support is cut off, how bad will the situation become? Frankly speaking, cutting SNAP is no different from making the poor work harder but receive less. It is estimated that approximately 133,000 Nevada residents, including tens of thousands of families in Las Vegas, will be directly affected by changes in SNAP regulations starting in 2026. This means that many families are facing the risk of losing their last lifeline. And when the buoy is gone, no matter how well you swim, even if you're as good as Michael Phelps, it's hard to escape the tsunami of costs that's coming, sweeping everything away and pushing you onto the streets. Can a nation, once known for its prosperity, except that thousands of families are struggling for every meal right in the heart of the Las Vegas Strip? If life rafts are gradually disappearing, what tools do we have left to keep people from being swallowed up in the vortex of poverty? 22% of children in Vegas are facing the risk of food insecurity. That number means that tens of thousands of children, the future generation of America, are going hungry every day. What's concerning is that this fact no longer comes as a surprise, as food prices in Vegas are ballooning like a ticking time bomb about to explode. An analysis by CBS News shows that essential items like ground beef and white bread have increased by over 40% compared to the pre-pandemic period. Basic products that were once familiar in shopping carts are now skyrocketing in price. A roll of toilet paper has jumped from $5 to $8, and a dozen eggs is approaching $9. If this trend continues, perhaps the simplest foods will be the first to disappear from the dinner tables of many families in Vegas. Even those who work regularly, have a stable income, or receive social assistance each month are still forced to rely on food banks to maintain their daily meals. These centers have recorded an 8% increase in support requests compared to the same period last year, and particularly, this increase was even more pronounced in the past month.
If I'd have went to the store, I got almost $200 worth of groceries right here.
Army veteran Irving James Sr. never thought he'd have to stand in line at a food bank. But with a fixed income and food prices rising daily, he had no other choice. His story isn't unique. It's a common reality faced by over 670,000 Nevadans every day. Another consumer shared, "Before, I would walk into the supermarket with $100 and 2 arms full of groceries. Now, with the same amount of money, I can lift the entire shopping cart with just 2 fingers." Those words revealed a bitter truth. Money is shrinking, while the cost of essential human needs is becoming increasingly expensive. In that context, the changes to SNAP are like pulling away the last life raft for low-income families. As prices escalate, subsidies are cut or tightened, further tightening the vicious cycle. Prices rise, benefits decrease, and ultimately, people find it harder to live. Everything in this country is getting more expensive, from food and housing to daily living costs, except for one thing: support for the elderly and the poor. If a veteran who once defended the nation also has to stand in line for food, what guarantees the safety and dignity of ordinary families? In a society where dinner has become a luxury, what will we leave for future generations beside fear and insecurity? If the previous section showed that rising prices have made even a simple meal a luxury, the next consequence is even more brutal. When they can no longer afford enough to eat, many families also lose the ability to keep a roof over their heads. From an empty stomach to being pushed onto the streets, that distance turned out to be more fragile than we thought. Las Vegas, already known for its high homeless population, is now sinking even deeper into crisis. Just a few blocks from the Strip, amidst the dazzling lights of million-dollar billboards, are long rows of crowded tents. Behind that prosperity, another city is quietly forming, the city of those left by the wayside. A report from the Southern Nevada Homeless Census, 2025, shows that Southern Nevada recorded over 7,906 homeless individuals during a single night of the annual survey, a figure nearly 16% higher than the previous year. Those are just the people who were counted. There could be even more in reality. And by 2025, this trend still shows no signs of stopping. Behind every number is a story. A young family lost their ability to pay rent after unexpected medical bills arose. A full-time worker, but as costs rose and SNAP benefits were cut, their monthly salary became meaningless. A father, after losing his home, had to set up a tent right next to a luxurious resort, where guests, separated by just a wall, were spending thousands of dollars for a weekend of leisure. Temporary camps are becoming increasingly dense. From Old Fremont Street to just off the Strip, colorful nylon tents lined up, crammed together amidst the harsh Nevada desert heat. For tourists, it's a shocking image. For local residents, it's a painful reminder that anyone can fall into that situation after just one small event. Homelessness is not just a personal issue, but also a burden on the entire city. Hospitals are seeing an increase in admissions related to people living outdoors. The already strained social security system now has to bear additional pressure. And neighborhoods just a few blocks away from the opulence have the look and feel of a post-war zone. Amidst that picture, many community organizations and private businesses are striving to fill the gap. Initiatives like Feeding America and free meal distribution programs from major supermarkets are becoming the last resort for thousands of people. But that's not enough to stop the rising tide. If a city that was once a symbol of dreams and light is now surrounded by homeless tent cities, what do we have left to pass on to future generations beside darkness and insecurity? Try to imagine a domino being knocked over. It didn't fall alone, but brought down a whole line of structures with it. That's how the food crisis in Las Vegas is unfolding, starting with insufficient meals, then spreading to an inability to pay rent, and ultimately pushing many families onto the streets. Vegas has long been known for its high homelessness rate, but the situation is now even worse. According to the 2024 point-in-time count report, Southern Nevada recorded over 6,500 homeless individuals in a single night of surveying, an increase of nearly 16% from the previous year. This is no longer a temporary phenomenon, but a dangerous trend that is swelling like a wave spreading across the city. And every number in that report is not just data, but a lost home, a family forced to live in the desert's sun and wind. The picture is most vivid in the area just a few blocks from the Strip. Amidst the dazzling lights of million-dollar billboards, rows of crowded tents surrounded the sidewalks. During the day, the scorching heat reaches over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, leaving many exhausted. At night, they have to huddle under thin blankets, listening to the music from casinos echoing like a cruel irony. For tourists, it's a shocking image. For local residents, it's a reminder that the distance between stability and homelessness is as thin as a bill. From the food crisis, the domino effect spread to all aspects of life. Hospitals are reporting a rise in admissions due to exhaustion, malnutrition, and untreated chronic diseases. Schools face children who come to school hungry, have difficulty concentrating, and fall behind. Small businesses lose customers as the surrounding community becomes increasingly impoverished. A chain reaction where each broken link leads to new consequences. In this picture, it's not just the homeless who are suffering. The whole city is also being drawn into the vortex. Local budgets need to spend more on healthcare and social services, while revenue from tourism is threatened by conflicting images right in the center. Behind the neon lights, Las Vegas is grappling with an increasingly dark side, and there are no clear boundaries separating those two worlds. Amidst this situation, some major organizations and brands stepped in to slow down this domino effect. Feeding America, in partnership with national food retailers, has launched a free meal distribution program and expanded its food bank network in Nevada. They couldn't solve the problem at its root, but at least they created a temporary buffer, preventing many families from being pushed down another step. If a city known for its luxury is now surrounded by rows of tents and hungry bellies, how far will this domino effect go? And more importantly, do we have the courage to rebuild the pieces before everything collapses? A city can survive when the streets become deserted and buildings are abandoned, but it will struggle to exist if the younger generation grows up in poverty. In Las Vegas, behind the dazzling lights of the Strip, thousands of children are going to school on empty stomachs, living in temporary homes or tents packed closely together just a few blocks from the center. Those early memories will not fade, and their impact will last not just for a year, but for a generation. When snap, A program that once ensured basic meals was cut. The first consequences fell on the shoulders of children. Teachers at many elementary schools say the number of students coming to class without breakfast has increased significantly. A hungry child cannot concentrate, cannot learn, and easily falls behind their peers. Hunger, therefore, is not just a lack of nutrition, but also an invisible barrier to knowledge and the future. This effect also extends beyond the classroom. Children growing up in deprived environments are at high risk of long-term health problems, malnutrition, obesity due to cheap but low-quality diets, and even psychological disorders. A study by the US Department of Health and Human Services found that children experiencing long periods of food insecurity are twice as likely to face difficulties in learning and social development. These numbers signal a vicious cycle. Today's generation of poverty could become tomorrow's unstable citizens. A generation that grew up amidst instability will find it difficult to trust a system that was expected to protect them. When children see their parents working tirelessly, but still not having enough to eat, their belief in, if you try hard, you will succeed, also diminishes. And as the American dream gradually loses its meaning, even at the dinner tables of young children, this country must confront a fundamental question. What are we passing on to the future? Nevertheless, there are still small glimmers of hope. Community initiatives, from free school lunch programs to the No Kid Hungry campaign spearheaded by major brands, are attempting to partially fill the gap. The hot meals and free milk cartons, though small, are a beacon of hope to ensure children are not completely left behind. If children grow up in poverty and homelessness, does Las Vegas have a future beyond the brightly lit casinos? And if we leave the next generation struggling in the dark, what light will guide America tomorrow? In Las Vegas, the paradox becomes most apparent when you simply turn a corner. On one side is a row of gold-plated hotels, their bright neon lights never dimming. On the other, cramped rows of tents where families huddle together in the desert heat and the darkness of uncertainty. The question is there a way to escape the increasingly widespread cycle of poverty and homelessness? The starting point for any solution must still be food. When people no longer have to worry about an empty stomach, they can think further ahead to finding work, paying rent, or caring for their children. Therefore, nutrition assistance programs, whether called SNAP or in any other form, need to be maintained at a minimum level to prevent a mass catastrophe of families being pushed onto the streets. A study by the Urban Institute shows that households receiving SNAP benefits are less likely to lose their homes compared to those without assistance, indicating a strong link between food security and housing security. But the meal wasn't enough to solve the problem at its root. A more sustainable housing policy is needed. Without additional affordable housing programs, the trend of the homelessness crisis can only worsen. Some experts propose expanding the housing first model, prioritizing stable housing first, followed by support for job placement and medical treatment. Despite ongoing debate, this model has helped many other cities reduce homelessness rates in the long term. Beside that, community support is needed to prevent the domino effect from spreading. Schools can become safe havens by providing free lunches and after-school programs for children, ensuring that even if they lack at home, they still have a place to be cared for. Local hospitals can partner with non-profit organizations to provide low-cost medical services to people living on the streets. And more importantly, the city government needs to create mechanisms for people to quickly access assistance without bureaucratic overlap. The remaining issue is the choice of society as a whole. If thousands of families are allowed to live in tents right next to the Strip, Vegas will continue to lose the trust of its own residents and visitors alike. But if the city invests in sustainable solutions, from basic meals and affordable housing to educational opportunities for children, it can gradually rebuild the belief that the American dream hasn't completely disappeared. If the Strip's lights only shine on faded tents, what is the true measure of prosperity? And are we willing to trade short-term glamour to protect a long-term future for the entire community? On the dazzling boulevards of Las Vegas, the music and lights still create the illusion of a city that never sleeps. But just a few blocks away, a different reality is unfolding. Long lines of crowded tents, cars turned into overnight sleeping quarters, and children growing up in poverty. That contrasting image raises a haunting question. Where will Vegas go when meals have become a luxury dream and roofs are out of reach? The problem doesn't stop at food or housing crises. It touches the core of this city's ability to maintain its appeal. Visitors to Vegas come not just to gamble, but to seek a slice of the American dream, a place where opulence symbolizes abundance. But as homelessness and poverty become increasingly visible on every street corner, will that image still be enough to keep them there? A city that relies on tourism and services cannot survive long if the parallel image is poverty and instability. What future awaits children when they have to study in cars? What future awaits workers when they have to choose between paying rent or buying food? And what future awaits Vegas when those images gradually become a familiar part of the city's identity? This is not just a social question, but also an economic one, because an exhausted community cannot sustain a stable workforce for the service industry that feeds Vegas. Amidst that gloomy picture, there are still efforts to find a way out. Organizations like United Way of Southern Nevada and Feeding America have partnered with many large businesses to expand food support networks, provide temporary shelter, and create skills training programs for unemployed workers. Some hotel corporations are also starting to invest in affordable housing projects, hoping to retain the workforce that is the backbone of the tourism industry. This is not a complete solution, but it is an important step to prevent the city from falling deeper into crisis. Ultimately, the future of Vegas will depend on today's choice. Continue building tall skyscrapers just to hide the tents, or dare to confront and address the growing inequalities at their root. If a city that was once a symbol of American light and dreams is now surrounded by the shadows of poverty, will we let it collapse or rewrite a different future together? And when history looks back, will Vegas be remembered as the city of illusions or the city that found its light? Today, Las Vegas is not just a city of lights and casinos, but also a place that exposes America's greatest paradox. Amidst the extravagance, there are still hungry bellies. Amidst the gold-plated hotels, there are still faded tents. From food shortages and inability to pay rent to being evicted, it's all becoming a vicious cycle that thousands of families can't escape. The future of Vegas, and more broadly, the future of an entire generation, will be determined by how we choose to act today. Can we continue to turn a blind eye to the long lines of tents right next to the glittering strip? And if we let a city live on illusions but sink into poverty, what meaning does the American dream hold for future generations? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. If you find these things worth pondering, please like, share, and subscribe so the story doesn't get buried in obscurity. Your concern is the first step for the light to find its way back. The content in this video is created for informational and analytical purposes, based on publicly available data sources, research reports, and documented community stories. This is not an absolute affirmation of all aspects of the issue, nor is it intended to criticize or assign blame to any individual, organization, or government. Some details may be general or illustrative to help the audience better visualize the setting. Viewers are encouraged to consult additional reliable sources for a more comprehensive and objective perspective. The video's final message is simply to spark interest, discussion, and reflection on existing social challenges.